right, so this week I am starting the video with a couple of announcements because I know a lot of people don't stay and watch till the end. So I figured if I put them up here in the beginning, you'd at least be able to hear what they are. So the first one is I'm going to be putting out a bonus video on Wednesday because I did a preservation project that takes a little bit more time for all of the steps to complete, and I wanted to share that with you. And I know the challenge is kind of officially over. My videos went from Sunday to Saturday, so technically Sunday was the last day of August, so I've just kind of extended it in through this week for the most part. And then the second announcement is I have had people asking me what I do with all of the things that I put into my pantry. So items that I can or dehydrate and preserve. Do you just eat them out of the jar, throw them on the stove, warm them up? What do you do with them? Like, give me some ideas. So I thought it would be fun to do a little series. It's not a challenge, but just kind of a laid back series, and it's called Creative Pantry Cooking. And I did create an Instagram account, and I will link that down below in the description. So go take a look at that and go over there and just follow along. That way, if you're one of our awesome subscribers or viewers, you will kind of be kept up to date on what's going on and when that's coming out. And as well as if you are a creator or you know a creator that you think would like to participate in this, tag them so they can go over there and follow along as well. And what we're going to do is, I know Jessica does a challenge in January, February, where you eat and make meals out of your pantry for 2 months. Now, I'm just going to be honest, I am not really at the point where I want to only eat out of my pantry for 2 months. And sorry, there's a jet going overhead. But I do want to participate kind of in that same kind of theme of showing you guys what we make out of the pantry. So by doing that, I figured those of us creators who just kind of want to share but don't want to do that actual challenge can kind of join in with what she's doing, but in a more low-key format, if that makes sense. So anyway, I just wanted to announce that, and now we will get started on showing some of the things that we did this week. So one of the first things I did this week is went down and started picking some of my peppers, and I have tons of peppers, again, because we were going to have a farm stand, but because we're not, I am going to make a big batch of salsa, and you can see just how big these peppers are. I've kind of avoided picking them because I didn't really know what I was going to do with a whole lot of them, but now is the time to pick them, and I think I'm going to list some on Facebook Marketplace, that with some of the tomatoes, because I'm just overloaded at this point. But you can see I grew green bells, I grew the colored bells, so I've got some ones that are turning to the red and some that are kind of yellowish. I do have some purple bell too, but I didn't pick any of those this morning. But you can see now I'm in the next row over, which is my Roma tomatoes, and I have 19 plants in this row, and they are absolutely loaded. You can just see how many are on here. And this is a determinate type, which means that it just kind of grows to its size and it puts on all of its tomatoes, and they all kind of tend to ripe near the same time. I do find I get big clusters of ripening, and then the ones that you can see there that are green, I kind of get a couple, maybe 2 or 3 little batches of just mass clusters that ripen at the same time. But you can see how nice and big some of these Romas are. And this is one of the crates that I picked this morning. And this is my absolutely precious little helper. She came to visit me for Memorial Day. So she was washing the tomatoes. She calls them tomatoes. And out of respect for her mom and her, we don't show her face, but isn't she a dolly pie? She had so much fun helping me with this. And then she was ready to go play, so I started working on the peppers. And again, you can just see how ginormous these have gotten down there. I just think this one's kind of cool. It was one of the colored bells. It was starting to turn to the yellowishy red color, and these colored bells were starting to go to red. And I just grabbed one of my Marconi peppers. It's a roasting pepper, but I'm not super picky about what kind of peppers I put in my salsa recipe. So I'm just going to rinse all of the field dirt off of these so they're nice and clean. And then I always cut my pepper like core out like this. What do you do? I mean, I used to cut them in half, and I found when I did that, I tended to have more seeds going everywhere. Whether it makes a difference, I don't know, but I just pull the core out and then I cut it in half. And then I start working on removing the membrane and the seeds that are all inside of there. And it's kind of a messy process, but I just worked on getting these all cut and chopped in half. And then once I did, this is what I ended up with, and I got my little chipper chopper, I like to call it. I think I just got this on Amazon, and I have the smallest grid pattern there so that I can get the pieces as small as possible. And you just put your pieces on there and give it a couple good whacks, and it makes some perfectly little cubed squares for you. So I'm just going to load these on here. Most of the peppers I had already cut into the manageable size to fit onto this chopper. If you have too big of pieces, you obviously can't get it shut like this one, so I'm gonna have to give that one a chop. But as soon as I got all of the peppers all chopped up into the nice little small pieces, this is what they looked like. And it just saves so much time of hand chopping everything. It's one of my favorite little machines to use when I do salsa. And then I also needed to get 2 whole bulbs of garlic peeled because this recipe calls for 2 bulbs, and it makes it really delicious. But these are some of the garlics that I harvested earlier in the year and got them all cured. And I do have one of those like silicone things that you put the garlic in and rub it on the counter, but for some reason I found that it doesn't particularly work too well with my garlic right now. The longer it's cured, it tends to work better, but I just decided to use the method with a knife. And no, I'm not dumping stuff on the floor. I have my compost bucket down there so I can just kind of put all my scraps away really quickly. Many times when I cut like the bottom end of the garlic off, the part that was connected to the root base of it, it's much easier for me to get the peel off. And if not, I go ahead and give it a little whack. But I had to be careful. I found that regardless that I was kind of giving the same consistent pressure of whacking it with the back of the knife, some of the garlic was a little more tender than others, and I smashed a couple of them, but again, doesn't really matter. It's just going into salsa. And you can see that I'm cutting that one in half, and I will show you here in a second a better view of that. But I'm just doing that so that I can fit them all onto my chopper, and again, get these into as small a pieces as possible. And see how kind of fat or wide, whatever you want to call it, that piece of garlic is. I'm just cutting it in half so it's a little bit thinner, and that way I don't have a whole bunch of really like long little square pieces. They're more uniform for going into the salsa. So once I get those all whacked, I put them back onto the cutting board because they were still a little bit bigger than I wanted them to be for my salsa. So I'm just going to kind of give them a little bit of the restaurant style chop on the cutting board to break them down a little bit further. And then once that is done, I am going to take, I love this little tool. This one I think I got at the thrift store, but they have a similar version at the dollar store for scooping all of your stuff up. So I got those in the pot. Now, these are some of the onions that I cured earlier, and if you'd seen some of my earlier videos, I had mentioned that I only grow onions pretty much for making salsa. We don't eat a whole lot of fresh onion and stuff. We more like use granulated onion and things like that. But someone once told me that if you grab a hold of the peel up at the neck, they're much easier to peel that way. So I do that as much as possible, and then sometimes I just grab and peel it this way as well. But you can see a little bit of green on there. They kind of sat out where they got a little bit more sun than they should have while they were hardening off, and so it kind of started to do its chlorophyll thing. Not really harmful to eat it, but it can make it a bit bitter. So I'm going to take this onion. At first I thought, well, I'm going to chop it, and then I'm like, oh girl, you got to chop it in half first so it fits on your little chimney chopper over there. So then once I got it cut in half, then I cut it into little half rings, I guess you'd call it, and then proceeded to cut out the little piece of the root core that was still attached to the bottom of the onion, and then loaded these all on my little chopper and got these all put into nice little tidy squares for myself. And I was crying, so I went and got my daughter's goggles. These were her goggles from when she was like 12 and she's 16 now. So they were like sucked so tight to my face, I probably looked like a freaky little alien in my kitchen. But thankfully I was the only one in the house at this point, and nobody got to see how crazy I looked. But this right here is the other way that I kind of peel my onion, is I will just get most of the outside off and then chop it. Now you can see I have it all put into cute little squares, and I'm going to get that all dumped into my big stock pot. And yes, if you've been here before, you know I am a scraper. I worked hard to get all those little pieces of onion, and by golly, they're all going to go into my pot. So I got them all scraped out, every last one of them. called for 4 large green peppers, and the equivalent is roughly 1 cup of these chopped up little peppers. And I used kind of heaping cups. It didn't really matter to me. I'm not super specific when I make my salsa recipe. I just kind of eyeball it based on what the recipe is. If I go over, no big deal. And then I had my jalapenos, and I put my gloves on for these because, oh my word, one time I didn't, and I thought I had washed my hands really well, and some of the like liquid juice from the jalapenos had gotten under my fingernail, and my eye burned for 2 days. So learned my lesson, and now I wear my little gloves. But I'm going to get these chopped in half, and the recipe calls to remove the seeds from half of the jalapenos and leave the seeds in half. I'm a little bit of a wimp, so I take out more seeds than the recipe calls for, just so it isn't so hot. And then I just kind of use my knife or my finger to take the seeds out of the core. The thing I don't like about this is that the seeds are so tiny and they're messy and they stick to everything, including my gloves. But I got these all de-seeded, and then I tried to get everything onto a paper towel and wrapped up, so that I had as few of these hot seeds in my salsa as possible, and got those in the compost. And then I just loaded up my chopper with my jalapenos and got those all brought down to their nice little size. And we'll get those added to the stock pot. And that is it for the vegetables. Now this recipe calls to add 1 cup of water just for the cooking process. You can leave it in if you want, because it does really end up with a lot of salsa flavor, or you can strain it, whatever you prefer. It called for 2 tablespoons, or 1 tablespoon of garlic, 1 tablespoon of onion powder, 2 tablespoons of seasoning salt, and then that was a 1/4 cup of vinegar, white distilled vinegar, and then I used 3 tablespoons of lime juice. I love the way lime tastes in my salsa, and this is not really enough lime to bring it up to the acidity levels that it needs to be. And then cilantro. I can never seem to grow cilantro at the time of year that my tomatoes and peppers are going gangbusters and it's time to do my salsa. So I grow it in the spring and in the fall, and I dehydrate it as much as possible so that I have plenty to use in my salsas. And I have more going in the garden, so I'll get that replaced here pretty soon. And then I'm going to just mix this all together, turn the heat up to kind of a medium low, and this needs to cook all together for about 30 minutes, just so it softens the vegetables really well, and then I can work on my tomatoes. Now with my tomatoes, I can't use my little chimney chopper because it would just smash my little romas into oblivion. So I take them, cut them in half again, and then I cut them into little squares with my knife. And it's kind of tedious, but if I don't do it this way, I don't get nice little squares. And the reason I'm doing it this way is my husband likes chunky salsa, so does one of my daughters. I have a family member that just kind of puts it into the blender and makes kind of a blended mixed salsa, and I would do that, but again, the purpose of this recipe here is for making chunky salsa. So now that I have all the tomatoes done, I'm getting those in there, and I'm going to stir this all together, and then I'm going to let it cook for probably another 10-15 minutes, just so that all of the ingredients in here get nice and hot, so that they're all ready to go into my jars. Then I pulled some of my hot jars out and got my funnel on there, and as I'm loading my jars, I'm kind of straining some of the juice off so that there is more chunky in my salsa than liquid. And then after I get that filled up to the 1 inch of headspace, I am going to take and add half a teaspoon of citric acid to the top of the jars, just to bring that acidity level up to where it needs to be for safe canning. And take my handy dandy plastic chopstick and wiggle it around in there and debubble. Wipe it with a wet rag. Get one of my 4 jars canning lids that I've pre-rinsed and stuck together, and get that put on there. And then get my ring, of course, put it on finger tight, and get this lifted into the canner. And I filled all 7 quarts with my canner and processed these for 45 minutes, and this is how pretty they were when they came out. And my husband was already looking forward to having some. little ride down to the corn patch because some of the ears of corn, like the smaller ones, I usually get about 2 per stalk, and the main one is always really great, and the second one is always smaller, and sometimes they just tend to get overripe really fast. So I need to come through and pick all of the ones that remain in here, and the ones that are kind of bad I'll probably just give to the chickens as a snack, and the rest we will probably get canned up, put into some kind of soup, or just canned. So here I just have some of my fruit fresh, and I'm going to get that put into a bowl and some cold water on it, because if you were with me last week and you saw all the pears that I canned, I had some left over. They're Bartlett pears that I got from my mom. These were the ones that weren't ready for canning last week, but this week they are very ripe. So we are going to work on getting these put in a dehydrator. Again, this is not my favorite thing with pears because they're so darn slimy, but just like I do when I do them for canning, I peel them, get all the core out, and then I'm just taking this knife and slicing them. And no, this knife is not very sharp, so no risk of me cutting myself at all with this one. But the pears are ripe enough where it just goes through it very easily. And you can kind of see that I make them sort of thick. I think I'm showing another scene coming up here in a second, but just the same old thing, getting all the core out. Most of the pears this year actually were really good. I mentioned last week they're organic, and so sometimes you have a surprise friend in there, and this year I didn't find hardly any. So that was kind of a nice thing for a change, because last year they were pretty messy. But yeah, you can kind of see just how thick that I'm cutting them. And then once I got them all cut and they soaked in the fruit fresh for a while, then I started loading them on my dehydrator trays. And I really tried hard at first. I kind of gave up after a while because there's so many darn pieces. But I tried to get all the larger pieces on one tray so that they dried as evenly as possible, and the trays that had the smaller pieces on them, I could get them out of the dehydrator sooner if I needed to, and let the one with the larger ones keep on drying. But this is what it looked like when I had all 3 trays loaded up, and then I got them all dried, and they do turn slightly brown, but it's not bad. And then I got them put in this cute little jar, and of course the kids were already in them before long. So I did go out and pick the remainder of those 19 Roma plants, and I ended up with a couple of crates, and then I did put some in 20-pound boxes and 10-pound boxes, and these are ones that I'm going to try and sell on Facebook Marketplace. My mom came over and got a whole bunch of tomatoes and some other produce, and she brought me this large mixing bowl of Italian plums. So I get to look forward to processing those next time. But I just wanted to leave you with a pretty sunset picture that I got to enjoy the other night as we close out. And thank you all for hanging out with me, and I will see you next time.